Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to recap SEC basketball games from Tuesday night, February the 15th. Blake, we had anticipated this night as maybe the best night in the SEC in terms of midweeks, and it didn't disappoint.
No, it was pretty, dramatic at times. As we said, the three games in particular had some significant, implications in terms of what it meant for those teams involved. I know, we'll talk about Florida probably at the end, but
Yeah.
certainly the Castleton injury is significant. But I mean, look, I'm not, that was a team that was certainly going to be fighting to stay on the bubble or get near the bubble, even with him, I think. And so, but still, that it's a win for Florida. And like you said, they're kind of in a position where they got to win out, I think. And obviously, it's going to be much tougher now without him on the court. But yeah, the other three games were as good as advertised. And again, some very interesting results based on how those three in particular played out.
Let's start in Knoxville, where Tennessee snapped a two-game losing streak, took down top-ranked Alabama, ending Alabama's hopes of going 18-0 in the SEC. There were a lot of stories here, Blake. I thought Tennessee's physical style bothered Alabama. What was it, 19 turnovers to 8? If you want to encapsulate everything in one stat, that was probably the difference. I think Tennessee got, according to our buddy Brian Hartman, I want to say 26 points off turnovers compared to 2 for Alabama. I know that's misleading sometimes because you got open court turnovers and other kinds, but that was what it was. That was a big thing. Brandon Miller, 4 of 11 from the field. I was watching in the second half, Blake. I recall Alabama getting one pretty good look for Miller on a 3, which he hit. I don't know that Alabama got a great look in the second half the entire time aside from that. Tennessee's defense was unbelievable last night.
It's almost like that's been the case for most of the season.
It's almost like it.
Yeah, boy, I've got some thoughts on this game because, man, you want to talk about some overreaction. Holy cow, I've seen some overreaction to the Alabama side of things. But on the Tennessee side, yeah, I mean, it, as we said, play out the last 2 games 10 times. It's only happening once the way that actually happened. They're not losing both games on buzzer beaters. Still a good team. And I thought there was a lot of overreaction just to that, just to, oh man, Tennessee's lost 2 games in a row. They're spiraling. Well, not necessarily. These are, these are the kind of games that Tennessee's going to win sometimes because of how they play and the defensive numbers. We said it's like our point, I think, was look at what they've given up in the past 2 games from 3, and they're still number 1 in the country in 3-point defense, and they're still holding opponents to like 24% from 3, and they don't give you good looks. Alabama goes 9 of 24, which is not bad, right? It's 38%, but it's not double-digit Alabama, 3-point makes. And something else, like just the way Tennessee plays defense, you talk about the turnovers. That was something earlier in the season we talked a lot about with Alabama was the tendency just to turn the ball over. And I thought there were a lot of similarities between this game and the UConn game because UConn came out in that game in November and sort of just right away just sort of smacked Alabama in the mouth with the physicality. And you felt like the entire game Alabama was still trying to adjust and find good shots. And now look, there were probably, I don't know, I'd have to look up the numbers to compare them, but I think similar in terms of number of fouls, free throw shot, but like now, and again, I understand UConn struggled a little bit there and has lost some games since then, but I thought that was one of the similarities you could draw just based on a team coming out and it being pretty evident early on that, some of that physicality when you have a team playing like that can cause an issue. But at the same time, here's something to remember if you're an Alabama fan. you're not going to see a team just like Tennessee because Tennessee is unique, and this is what we talked about all season long. Yes, there are going to be some physical teams, but I don't know if there's another team out there that's as physical as Tennessee in terms of how they play defense. So maybe you can take that away, knowing that as long as you don't run into Tennessee, perhaps you may be okay. But yeah, I mean, give Tennessee. Think about this too. Tennessee did this without Josiah Jordan James. They did it without Julian Phillips, and they still beat the number one team in the country, and did it still doing what they do. They defended. Yes, they had some stretches where they struggled to score, but I think once again that's because people are not giving enough credit to how good Alabama is defensively. Which, by the way, Alabama still has not given up more than 69 points in league play, even though they lost this game. So, yeah, hats off to Tennessee because they hit some big shots. Adu had a big game. The big men, I thought the physicality of Adu, Plavsic, that was the difference for me. And of course, the physicality of the guards just guarding on the perimeter. Hey, it was one of those games where I said this on Twitter. I think if you're Alabama, you need a game like that. I think if you're Tennessee, you need a game like that because those are the kind of games that probably get you ready for the NCAA tournament more than any, based on how the game's called. And there was there's a lot of physicality. Most physical SEC game I've seen this season. And not everything was called, but you know what? Once you get to the tournament, that's the way it's going to be. And so I thought it was maybe a good game for both sides, just in terms of how they reacted to it, and what they take away kind of moving forward.
Okay, we have been critical at times. And by the way, we're going to get to Tennessee in a minute, but I wanted to wrap up. There were 2 points I wanted to hit on Alabama.
Hold on. I want to make sure we get to Alabama in a second because we just talked a lot about Tennessee. I don't want to let the Alabama side slip away, so I'll go back to Alabama when you get done. So, because I got a lot to say still about Bama.
Okay, so you want me to go to Tennessee now?
Whichever way you want to go. I'm just saying I don't want to overlook something that I'm going to say about Alabama because I don't want to just race away from Alabama just yet because there's something I want to point out with them. So,
and my apologies, we're having a little bit of an audio delay on my end as they continue to mark up my neighborhood for internet service and then do nothing. But anyway, that aside, where I was going to go with Alabama, and then I'll get to my points on Tennessee. We've been critical at times of Kentucky for too much reliance on however you want to put it. And look, you were the more basketball strategy mind of the two of us. So I'm going to throw this at you and see what you think. Not running offense, too reliant on dribble penetration, those kind of things. I feel like I saw some of that in Alabama last night. Oh, here comes the smirk. I see it already. I feel like I didn't see a lot of ball screens and stuff like that out of Alabama last night. And look, you're playing Tennessee, you're playing them on the road. That's going to make it tough. But one criticism I've heard leveled of Alabama last night was that people didn't like the offense it ran. So I'm going to let you.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Folks.
It's almost like I've insulted Dennis Gates.
This is because I've seen this on Twitter too. I'm sorry. Like I don't mean to ridicule this. It is an absolutely a fair point to point out that Alabama struggled to handle the physicality of Tennessee last night. And what did that do? That threw off their ability to run their offense. And of course it did, because look at how Tennessee plays defense. How many opponents can we say the exact same thing about? I mean, this is what Tennessee does. Did anyone watch the Kansas game back in November? Like, this is what they do when they're at their best. So to act like this is an Alabama only problem is kind of, I don't think, the right answer, because when Tennessee is playing the way they played last night defensively, they can make people look silly on the offensive side of the floor. Once again, you have to put this in the context of Tennessee has numbers that are, record-setting type numbers in terms of what we've seen for the last little while. Like, that's how good they've been defensively this season. Look at how many opponents they've held under 60 points, under 50 points. Like, this is why they're the number one defensive team in the country. And of course, it's going to cause Alabama to get all out of whack. and not be able to do exactly what they want to do. And we can say they're over reliant on this or that. But as we just pointed out before, Auburn's a pretty good defensive team too. And to say that Alabama couldn't handle what Auburn took at them, well, Alabama won the game by 8 points on the road. So I've seen that kind of tied into this Tennessee game. Did we forget that Alabama won that game? So I think I get it. Like people, I have a feeling a lot of people maybe just tuned into Alabama for the first time last night and all of a sudden thought, well, this is who they are. Yeah, that's what a lot of teams are against Tennessee. And of course they are, because Tennessee, as I said, is the most physical defensive team I've probably seen this season. You could throw a couple more in there. Like, I mean, again, just for at the time, like UConn was that back in November. I think Houston's in that category, teams like that. But it's fine to say that's the criticism of Alabama, but I also think that we're still leaning on they can only score on via the three, and they take too many threes. What did we say, Chris? I mean, the Auburn game, they shot 82% from two. They went 23 to 28. They responded in that game. They didn't just sit back and take threes. Like, they got to the rim, they attacked, but it was just tougher against Tennessee. Like, Tennessee is just a team that, once again, we can overreact to what Tennessee had done the previous 2 weeks, but let's not act like they're going up against a kiddie team here in terms of how they play defense. Just sitting back, arms out, just good luck. Like, that's not how it works. So that's all I got. Like, I just think the overreaction, and I know, like, it's some people, and I'm not saying that some of the points are not valid, because you can point that out, but I don't think Alabama's going to see many teams like Tennessee, and I don't think we should just completely say, well, Alabama's, and I've seen this, Alabama's overrated. This team just went 12-0 to start league play. Their first loss of SEC play is in mid-February to what has pretty much been the second best SEC team all season, outside of a couple of recent things where we moved A&M ahead of Tennessee. But I mean, are we really should we really be like, boy, Alabama's in trouble? They've now lost 4 games this season. They just lost one by 9 on the road to the best defensive team in the country. I don't know how to respond to that, I guess. So I don't know what else to say.
Oh, I think you did know how to respond to that. I should have put a timer on that.
I mean, it's just, but I get, this is what we do. I understand, but it's just, come on, folks. Like, Alabama's 22-4. Like, they're 12-1 in the SEC. It's the first game they've lost. To act like that they are just, all of a sudden a team that doesn't know what they're doing. Yeah, here's what you can do. If you want to do this, all right, I'll give you this. All right. They lost to Tennessee on the road. The Mississippi State, team that's also very physical, right, defensively. They struggle a bit with that one in Tuscaloosa. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Auburn, they won that one on the road. Auburn's physicality got to them a little bit, but Alabama turned it around, made some shots. Who are some other comparisons? They beat Mississippi State on the road. Same team we talked about a minute ago. Beat Arkansas on the road. Pretty good physical defensive team. Beat Houston on the road. Number 1 team in the country, probably next week if they win whoever. And I don't think Alabama should drop that much. They lost at number 10 Tennessee. UConn, Gonzaga, Oklahoma. Those are the losses, right? Well, Gonzaga one was more about just the Zags making every shot they could find. So was kind of the Oklahoma one. Oklahoma needed its perfect offensive performance, and they kind of got that in that one. And again, Alabama was not making shots. So I wish it didn't have to turn into this. I wish it didn't have to turn into me somehow trying to defend the number 1 team in the country from losing a game against one of the other better teams in the country. But somehow we got here. And so, not to take anything away from Tennessee, but let's not overreact to Alabama losing a road game against the second best team in the SEC, perhaps, and a top 10 team in the country. Let's give Tennessee some credit for that. So
I'm glad it turned. We don't get that version of you that often. It's usually when Dennis Gates gets insulted see, best drop this in the comments if you agree. Best Blake is annoyed Blake.
I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know. There's other versions that are probably better.
That's pretty good.
But do you disagree with me? Tell me where you disagree. Because I mean, this is why we have these discussions.
No, I mean you've
Are we
got some fair
concerned about
points.
Alabama?
I'm a little concerned about Alabama. I mean, I said this. Look, Alabama can still win the national title. Okay, so if you want to clip this out and hold it against me later, fine. I'll be more than happy to admit this was silly if Alabama wins the whole thing. Which, if Alabama does, then great. We'll be happy for everybody. But I am concerned the Connecticut game you brought up, the physical nature of play and the lack of maybe having a better answer than just take it at the rim or take contested 3-pointers. I mean, come on, you can allow for a little criticism. No, what's fair is to say that this has worked for them all year.
Criticism. Yeah, like I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
just shot it all down.
I did not. I'm saying I think we're going way too far.
Like a missile and a Chinese balloon.
There's no balloons coming down here. Like my point is that there's absolutely valid criticism, but I think we should not take it too far based on a couple games. And I don't know. Like I think I think by doing that, what we're doing is we're not kind of keeping part of the story on Tennessee, because
that is fair. That is fair for sure. Tennessee played without James and without Phillips, and they found Plavsic gave them maybe the best game he's had all year. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I haven't watched every one of their games from start to finish, but he was terrific. Didn't miss a shot. Was a force defensively. Hits that backward shot and gets the 3-point play. Gets the fourth foul on Miller, which was maybe the key play of the game in a lot of ways. Adu was great. Meshack was great. I mean, they had a lot of guys that were lower down the totem pole in terms of important guys step up and really come up huge last night. And oh, by the way, we said Tyreek Key might be a guy to watch in this one. He goes 1 for 9 in addition to those two starters being out, and they win. So I think that makes a pretty big statement about depth for Tennessee and a buy-in that Rick Barnes is getting to rolls.
Yeah. And so can we embrace that? Because I think it's unfair to Tennessee not to. I said this a minute ago. I think that's the most physical team that Alabama or anyone else is going to see this season with how they play defense. And I just think, again, that's going to make even the best teams, which, let's think about this, right? It's going to make the best teams struggle. And think about how many of those good teams they've beaten this year. Like, they've beaten Alabama now. They've beaten Texas now. They've beaten Kansas now. Go down the line. Like, I mean, they've beaten some good, Maryland, they've beaten some good teams. And it's because I think those teams struggle to adjust to kind of how Tennessee plays when they're at their best. And that's why still it's in the back of your mind that, we can talk a lot about Alabama and their path to a Final Four or a national championship. But it's still there to look at Tennessee and say, well, they can do it. Like they've got the pieces to get there. It's just we're going to have the same conversation about Tennessee is, are they going to have those gaps where they struggle to score? Because, as I've said, when that happens, it puts more pressure on them defensively. And, to where they have to be even more kind of flawless on the defensive side. And that's not always going to work out. There are going to be some stretches where they're not defending well or the other team's hitting shots, which we kind of saw that against Missouri. So, yeah, I realize it's kind of one of those things to poke at the other side of, well, Alabama wasn't that good to begin with. Well, when you do that, you're taking away what Tennessee has achieved here. And Tennessee has achieved a monumental win for their psyche, for starters, because they've lost 3 of 4 heading into that one. And now you get a huge home win because you got to go to Kentucky on Saturday. And so, yeah, I don't want to take anything away from Tennessee. I know we just talked about the Alabama rant and all that, but let's not kid ourselves and act like Tennessee is not a team that can do that to a lot of top teams, because they've already proven that they can. Now, something else Tennessee's done is lose some games that make you scratch your head, right? And that's where you worry a little bit about Tennessee. If you're comparing Alabama and Tennessee, to me, that's the difference right now, right? Is that Tennessee has lost some games that they probably shouldn't have lost. Alabama, you can say, okay, they maybe lost a couple games they shouldn't have lost. But when you look at the opponents, the Oklahoma one really stands out. Like there's no doubt about that. But like, the Tennessee game, or excuse me, the Tennessee one, it's like, well, you got the one at Florida, the Kentucky one, you know, the Vanderbilt one, as we said, like those are just the kind of ones that hold you back a little bit
It's a
from just
little head scratching.
yeah.
I mean, look, they've now beaten Blake. They have beaten 3 teams that might be number 1 seeds: Alabama, Texas, Kansas.
But they've
And
also
2 of
lost
those
to 4 teams that aren't going to make the tournament, right?
Well, yes, but you basically just mentioned that. That's why I said it's an odd dynamic with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but that's the SEC too this year. Let's be honest. Like we said, it's just, and we'll talk about the other games in a second, I promise. But this was kind of the biggest game given 1 versus 10 of the season, perhaps to this point. And I just think you have to keep that in mind. If we're talking about teams with a long-term potential to make that Final Four run, I don't think anyone should still question that the 2 teams that have the best chance to do that are Alabama and Tennessee. And I think last night we saw some of those things on the Tennessee side that can get them there. It is that way they play on the defensive side of the floor. It can absolutely get them there because they can hold down a team like Alabama to 59 points and not allow them to run what they want to run, take bad shots, not get open shots. Everything feels like it's contested or there's physicality, a bump. Like it's really hard to play against for 40 minutes. On the flip side, I think a game like that may wind up being good for Alabama because you're thinking, boy, can it really get more, physically intensive than that? I don't know that it can. And so that is the kind of game where Alabama's response, once they start playing more of these games, I'm not going to say against teams like Tennessee because I don't think there's a lot of teams out there like Tennessee, but similar kind of, situations. We said, take the UConn game earlier in the season. That's where I think you can start to form a better opinion on Alabama, perhaps. But for now, I'm still okay with the thought that the number 1 team in the country that's 22-4 and just lost its first SEC game, 13 games into the schedule, is still okay at basketball. I still think they're pretty good, and I think they're good enough to make a run to the Final Four and perhaps win it all. But they have to learn from a game like that because if they don't, then the criticism is valid. And if they find themselves in that situation again and they don't, find a way to sort of crack the code, then yes, that's certainly a valid criticism. So,
yeah. Last thing on Tennessee, because I've got a radio spot in 40 minutes. We got 3 more games to discuss. Unless you've got something else to add on this game, I don't think we talked much about Vescovi and Ziegler. Tennessee's all-ball defense was unbelievable last night. Alabama got nothing on the perimeter. Those 2 guys were great. Vescovi hit a foul shot or 2 late. Ziegler was good with the ball. You feel like after 23 and a half minutes, we would have exhausted most of the storylines on that, but I think that's one that's important to mention that we hadn't.
Yeah, I mean, those are the guys that, start the season. Those were the guys that were going to make you go, right? And yeah, I mean, Vescovi hits some big shots at the right time. That was what I thought too was kind of important here was the big shots came at the right time. And, Vescovi hit a couple of those corner threes and, that just they're still, the 2 guys, Vescovi and Ziegler, like they're still the 2 guys that I think are going to impact the game the most. And I don't think there's a lot of doubt about that. But, what they're getting to is, like we said, it's an A-Deuce stepping up and having a double-double, right? His physicality was really important in that game because, it did throw off the guys from Alabama, Bediako and those kind of guys. So, yeah, just once again, a great win for Tennessee. Tennessee earned the win. They played very well without 2 of their best players. And so please, let's give them a lot of credit for that. But it doesn't necessarily have to come at the expense of the other team because I just thought Tennessee was better than Alabama. And, had Alabama come back and won that game by a point or something, maybe the better team probably doesn't win in that instance. So, yeah, great win for Tennessee. Just a great win.
Who else got a win last night without two of its best players?
Yeah, Kentucky did. And once again, it's like it was really hard to kind of bank on that, right? It was like we said going into it. It's how could we know when that's coming? And that's the problem with Kentucky is you don't know when that's coming. Like we said, though, if you looked at the previous trends, perhaps the Alabama, South Carolina, then go to Tennessee and win, Arkansas, Georgia, go to Mississippi State and win. So now here's what you should expect from Kentucky based on that. They're going to win their next 3 games, and then they're going to lose one at home against Vanderbilt. And like that's just for some reason
that
seems to be the trend. But no, I mean in all seriousness, I mean it's a great win for Kentucky because now what? Like here they are. Like it was kind of funny. Like we can write them off pretty quick, but then it's like all it takes is a win like this and that bubble, which as we say, you have to field 68 teams, right? All of a sudden that bubble gets more interesting.
You don't have to do a lot if you're right there sometimes.
The net loves the SEC.
The net loves the SEC.
By the way, quickly, in the net, right? Like Tennessee beats Alabama, but no one's moving in the net this time. Like Tennessee's not jumping Alabama. Alabama stayed at 2, Tennessee stayed at 3. Once again, the net's just
to be fair, every game is now what 4% of a sample size. So
yeah, but the net
locked in a lot.
The net is just come on.
You don't
the
care
net
about
is
logic,
what it is.
You just hate the net.
Well, there is no.
You hate a computer
with the net, so I'm not a computer, so I prefer the human element of things. Kentucky's in the top 40 though. They're at 40. They swap places with Mississippi State. Mississippi State's back at 44 in the net. But yeah, Kentucky. Once again, you talk about big shots. I mean, Toppin hits a big 3 there down the stretch. I remember that one. Reeves hit some big 3s. Obviously, Wallace didn't have his best game scoring wise. He just could not find a rhythm and make shots. 0 of 8 from 3.
13.
Yeah, but he has 11 assists, and I think that's key too because they kind of need that. I mean, look, it was Kentucky ran their 5 out there, and they tried to win the game, and they did. You certainly had those guys off the bench playing some few minutes here and there, but credit to those 5 because Livingston, I thought, hit some big shots. I've said that recently in some of our videos. Like I think Livingston is the guy to watch here down the stretch because
I was going to ask you, what did you make of him kind of being their go-to guy at times in the second half? That was interesting to me.
Well, because he's got a lot more confidence and he's starting to hit some shots consistently. He scored 13 against Arkansas, 9 against Georgia, 13 against Mississippi State. I mean, that's 3 of his better offensive performances this season. And so I think that's a huge element here because again, you got to have it without, if you don't have Wheeler, you don't have Frederick, guys who can score a little bit. Not saying you got to have 15 a night from those 2 guys, but you got to have somebody step up. And I think Livingston in this game had to step up and make some shots, and he did. And he got to the free throw line too. That's always important, for Kentucky, I think, and especially against a team like Mississippi State, which, as we kind of talked about, they're not an easy team to score against, and that's not an easy place to play. So I thought that was one of Kentucky's best wins of the season, just given the setting, given the opponent, and how the opponent plays. And so, yeah, like I just thought I was really impressed with Kentucky because, like we said, that's what we look for from this team. You don't know when it's coming. You didn't know if this was going to be it or not, but they found a way, and that gives Kentucky a quad 1 win, which is what they have been desperate for. To keep adding to that tally, and they'll have another chance on Saturday against Tennessee. So, yeah, I mean, that's all I can say. Like, I was just really impressed with Kentucky. I thought they just did a lot of good things. When Mississippi State made that run, and you're like, uh-oh, is Kentucky about to give this thing away? Despite being up, they were up 12-13, I think, about 8 minutes left in the second half. And Mississippi State makes that run, you're like, oh boy, if Kentucky loses this one, they are done. But they found a way. They held them off. Like I said, had some guys hit some big shots. Toppin hit a big shot. Probably other guys I'm just forgetting, which we mentioned most of them. But think about that. We said all this without even mentioning Oscar Tshiebwe yet, and he was a big part of the puzzle, a usual double-double. But I thought Kentucky's other guys were key here, and they were significant in what is a very significant win for the Cats.
On the other side, I was looking at KenPom thinking Tolu Smith had to be the MVP of that game, and he was. He was 8 of 9 from the floor, 22 points, even 6 of 7 from the foul line. Blocked 3 shots, tremendous game of defeat. For State, you have said all along, and we'll hit this in bracketology, you kind of have felt they need to go 9-9 in conference play to get a bid. So the needle for them to thread now, it's a tough one. Ole Miss on the road, they should win that, but it's in-state rivalry. Those are tricky. Ole Miss plays hard. Missouri on the road, that's going to be really tough. A&M at home, got a chance. South Carolina should win that one. And then Vandy in Nashville in a game that could have, depending on what Vandy does, a lot more significance than we would have ever thought a month and a half ago.
Yep. Like I said, we'll get into more of that in our bracketology on Friday. But that path for Mississippi State is not ideal, I think, because I still think they got to get to 9-9. So they got to go 4-1. It's possible, but we'll see. So
Arkansas A&M. Man, Arkansas seemed to be in control of that one for a while until it just wasn't.
Yeah, that's a tough loss for Arkansas because, I mean, they did. Like, you felt like they were in control of that game. And, it was kind of one of those, kind of the opposite of some others we talked about, is it got off to a great start. A&M kind of makes a run, but then Arkansas kind of counters that a little bit. It felt like Arkansas had an answer every time A&M would try to make its run. And then eventually it's like, well, it just didn't happen. I thought, and remember, I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head with some of with just so many crazy games last night, but I thought Arkansas settled for a few shots late in the game. I think they took a couple threes late, I believe. Not really the shots they wanted, in my opinion, on a couple of those. And in close games like that, that's crucial, right? Like you gotta go to your strength. And I just thought that they did maybe settle for a couple threes late in that game. And again, Arkansas fans, don't vilify me here if I'm remembering wrong, but I think it was Council. Maybe Davis took one, which, I mean, look, Davis went 4 of 10 from 3. They went 5 of 16 as a team. But yeah, I did just, and that's tough too against A&M, right? Because A&M is we talk about physical teams, like A&M's a physical team. This was not, we predicted would this be the longest game of the season in the SEC. It only went 2 hours and 10 minutes. Arkansas only got to the free throw line 14 times. A&M got there 22. And yeah, I mean, a couple turnovers go the wrong way for Arkansas. A&M forces 13 there. And yeah, I mean, I thought that was kind of now perhaps of more significance here is what? That Nick Smith only plays 4 minutes.
Yeah, there hasn't been much of an explanation on that. It must be reading Musselman's comments after the game. Look, he's notorious for playing, the same 5-6 guys. Put a number on it. You might have a Mitchell twin coming off the bench for 8 minutes, or a Graham one night and not play the next. But he settles on the same guys. And I think we've both been wondering, okay, how do you reincorporate him into the offense when you got Davis, Black, and Council playing almost all the time? I don't know if that's a good way to articulate what the issue is, but that maybe reading between the lines seemed to be what he was saying last night. You tell me.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But it is one. I mean, say that, like, he's Nick Smith, and so I don't know, man. I mean, he's Nick Smith and he's really good. So at least, like I said, I think that's kind of where it's at is, that's the lineup you've been going with, and it's gotten you to be in this point, right? Of clawing your way back from 1-5 and being here. So yeah, that's an interesting situation moving forward because, like we said, Arkansas's got some tough games left, and by no means are safe to make the tournament. So I think that's it. It's just finding that balance somewhere of working him back in, trying to figure out. I don't know because that gets tricky too because you are playing the same guys, and at some point you have him there, right, to kind of relieve some of that, stamina issues or whatever. So I again this is what they do, and I get it, but yeah, I mean, look, I say like he's still Nick Smith, and I think he's going to have to play more if they're going to kind of make this run. I think especially, they still got road games at Alabama and Tennessee, right? And those can be significant for a team trying to, so.
Well, yes, but this is where the schedule cuts them a little bit of a break. They got Florida coming up at home without Castleton, and Georgia coming up at home. This sort of gives them a chance to mix and match and figure it out before what's going to be a super tough 3 to end the year with, as you said, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, the first 2 on the road.
Yeah, I mean, again, you don't want to overreact too much, but because they were in control of that game, but I think it's one where for Arkansas to get back to that Elite Eight, trifecta here, I think it's going to be with Nick Smith playing 20 plus minutes. It's not to knock the guys that have got them here, but I think in games like this, and again, some of these bigger games moving forward, where, like we say, if you get in foul trouble, if you got guys that just aren't making shots, aren't playing well, which again, you could look at that last night, right? Like some guys just didn't play well last night. And so knowing that you have that option available to you, I just think it's going to be a necessity for Arkansas to have him on the floor and have him be close to his best because they need it during the stretch run. So yeah, that was something that stood out. But once again, let's not take away anything from the winning team, and that's A&M, who is now 11-2 in SEC play, and there are still people out there who think that they're not in the NCAA tournament, which I don't know what to tell you right now. We are so fixated on Murray State and Wofford that we're just not looking at what's in front of us, and we're talking about a team that is now 1 game out of first place in the SEC. 1 game. Alabama's 12-1, A&M is 11-2. And you're telling me right now that they would not get in the NCAA tournament if the tournament started today. I don't know how many people. I think that number is getting lower, but again, let's call it what it is. You cannot remove the Murray State and Wofford games or Colorado. You can throw that one in there, but you also can't remove 2 wins over Auburn, win over Arkansas, win over Missouri, 2 wins over Florida, and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, A&M just keeps doing it. Now, they got a tough finish in the season schedule-wise, but let's just look at A&M and realize this is what this team is now. They are how about this? They are an SEC title contender. Texas A&M, who, again, was 6-5 on December the 20th with 2 bad losses at that point. Since then, they've won 12 of 14, something like that, 13 of 15, and here they are at 11-2. So,
okay, there's a couple topics I want to hit on here. You mentioned the NCAA tournament, and I don't think, does the committee do the last 10 anymore? It used to be a criteria. Is it still?
No, but
okay,
technically no. But
that's where I'm gonna go, because look, I have mixed feelings about that, but I've been doing a lot of thinking about this week. With transfers, with everything, where your roster is not the same from one year to the next. Basically, if you're much of anybody, it doesn't matter what league you're in, you're going to have significant changes. Does the last month and a half need to wait more than it does? Because sometimes it takes a while to get cohesion and figure out your rotations and all those things. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is, should we put even less stock in what A&M did pre-conference because of all those factors?
Well, I mean, here's the deal with A&M, right? If you look at just their sheet, that they're
Their
8-2
sheet is
in
not that impressive. Yeah.
well, they're 8-2 in quad 4. Which there's two things to that, right? It's that for one, you got two quad 4 losses. But the other is that 8 of your 19 wins are in quad 4. So, if you're just looking at it from the computer standpoint, sure. Like it's not that overly impressive. But, what they also have done is they've picked up 4 quad 1 wins, which is third in the SEC. You know, they're clean in quad 3, 5-0, 2-1 in quad 2. But yeah, like I don't know. I think it has to factor in somehow just to say, I mean, can we that's my thing about it is okay, we know what happened in non-conference play. We know they had a couple bad losses. But do those 2 games cancel out everything that they've done since then? You know? And should those 2 games really weigh that much when you look at what they've
Well,
done since December the 20th?
they are going to be the quintessential resume versus how good are you really team. I mean, I say that there may be somebody else out there in another league that's got a claim to that too. But that's going to be tough when you're the committee, because I can't see A&M is going to be in the tournament. I'd be shocked if it's not. Whether it can earn anything higher than 6-7 at best seems a little questionable to me. But let's say A&M gets in as a 9-10, something like that. I think it'll be a single digit seed. But let's just say A&M's an 8 or a 9. I feel like that's going to be a tougher 8 or 9 than anybody else is going to get. And if you're a 1 staring that down, I mean, you see those 8-9 teams come out of the first weekend in advance. If I am, that's where I think the committee's going to have a conundrum, because you're trying to reward resume and pre-conference schedule, but somebody might also get penalized by an A&M team that is underseeded in the sense that it's going to be a better team than where it's slotted. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I get it. And
I don't know what the right call is, because I don't know that I really agree with rewarding a team for something it didn't do. And especially, they've got no excuse for that pre-conference schedule after what happened last year. I'm sorry. A&M fans can get mad at me for that. That's just the truth. But it is really A&M is sort of a no-win situation for the committee, the way that I see it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, here's the thing too, and you have to factor this in. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they lose 4 of their last 5, because they're at Missouri, at Mississippi State, at Ole Miss, home against Tennessee and Alabama. Right? So those are all, again, 5-point games. That's the term we use.
They
I think
could
every
be a
game.
10, 11, 12 in that case. Yeah.
So that's where it gets tricky, because if people are still having the opinion at them at 11-2 in the SEC that they are borderline, then you start losing games, then it's like the quick hook, right? It's, get them out of there. Does it become that? Because there is a chance that they could go 1-4 down the stretch. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be, they are, for the second year in a row, it's very possible they're going to be the most fascinating team we look at, bubble-wise, heading into the SEC tournament. So,
well, and I feel like we're stealing from bracketology, and I don't want to do that much more. But I mean, you look at who they've beaten, and there's not a win there against a team that's guaranteed to be an 8 seed or better right now. got some wins against teams that are going to be in the field. You know, Auburn twice. I mean, I think Auburn's going to be in the field. It's not a slam dunk. Missouri, same thing. But I mean, that's it.
No, yeah. I mean, that's where it's like, pick your side. Do you knock A&M for not making their SEC schedule where they only play Tennessee and Alabama once? Or do you weigh so much now on those two games, knowing that those are basically the only two games they play against those two, and take the result and go over the top one way or the other? So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, these are all, again, fair points, but I just look at a team that's 11-2 in the league and feel like, you know, they're one game out of first with 5 games left and yet if they don't really have that much wiggle room, that becomes one of the more fascinating resumes we've seen. So
That's crazy. We're sitting here debating in a league that's probably going to get 6 to 7 teams in. could A&M win the league, or could A&M be left out of the field entirely at the field of 68? That is
we'll talk about that
a
on
bizarre
bracket
position to be in.
Yeah.
And yes, that's a strange position to be in mid-February. Yep. Okay, you know who else in a strange position? Florida. Colin Castleton on what looked like a fairly innocuous play. I still don't know what happened. I probably should have Google searched that, but I don't know if he caught his thumb in somebody's jersey or what happened, but was it a broken thumb? Is that what he had?
Broken hand, right?
Broken hand. Yeah. I mean, Colin Castleton misses a good bit of the second half. Didn't matter. Florida won by 15 anyway. Jason Jatoba, next man up for there. Florida did shoot the ball better, like a 10 of 17 from 3, which is uncommon for the Gators, and they're going to need a lot more of. They're capable of it, but they're going to need a lot more of it with Castleton on the shelf. He is far and away their best player, and in our opinion, I think a top 5 player in the league.
Yeah, no, you hate it for him because he is a top 5 player in the league. He's a first-team All-SEC guy, and you take him out of the equation. I already thought Florida had to win out, basically, to have a chance. Now that challenge gets much tougher because they're at Arkansas, home against Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, at Georgia, home against LSU. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge because he changes the way they play. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Like, everything he does on the floor, defensively, offensively, he changes how they can play, how they can, match up with some of these teams. It's like the Sheboy game, right? You look at those kind of things, like they're going to play Kentucky, and what do you do then? Because, I mean, he pretty much had Sheboy's number last time, right? Sheboy didn't play well in that game. 4 points against Florida last time. Castleton had 25. So, like, you just remove a guy like that from the equation. It's a different team. And it's already a Florida team that's been inconsistent. And again, remember, we've leaned on that. We're like, look, defensively, maybe it can will them to get there. But now you remove potentially the best defensive player in the league, or the most impactful player in terms of blocking shots and just his presence there. Yeah, it just completely changed the game. So, good for Florida to get this win. The issues continue for Ole Miss this season, but I have no, if you thought Florida was on the bubble, or if you still think Florida's on the bubble, it's really hard to find any confidence that they're going to be able to run the table here, because I think that's what it's going to take. Maybe they lose one. Maybe they lose at Arkansas, win the rest, and then win a couple in the SEC tournament. Maybe. But guess what? The committee's going to factor in. There's no Colin Castleton, perhaps, playing too. And so, yeah. So I think it's just, sort of the double whammy for Florida. Just don't have enough good wins at this point, and now you lose your best player. So,
yeah, I think it's going to have to be their guards are erratic. You see Jones have a couple of super games, but he just can't. He's not been the same player since he left Penn State. It doesn't seem to me. Kyle Lofton is flash. Will Richard, I've said, I think he's one of the more underrated players in the league. Very efficient, but he's not a high volume scoring guy. It's more like whatever comes to him is what he takes. We talked about Raleigh. I mean, they're very guard heavy now. I don't think that. I don't know. I don't say it. Jason Jatoba, the drop from Castleton to him is enormous. I just don't know how Florida keeps it together. But here's a random Florida question: is Kwesi Reeves the best dunker in the league? He threw down another one or two last night.
Yeah, I've always thought we should have a slam dunk contest.
We should.
Not you and me. The better SEC players. Just for full disclosure, no. I don't mean you and I having a slam dunk contest, but he'd be up there, yeah, and quite literally, he'd be up there if we had a slam dunk contest. But I don't know if he's the best in the league. But I mean, he can dunk the ball. I'll say that. So yeah, he's someone we talked about coming the season too. Just sort of, you saw that like at the end of last season, right? I think he had some really good games to finish off last season, and it's still been a little up and down this year, but I still think he's very entertaining to watch, and which I know ties into your question, but he is very entertaining to watch.
Give me your quick, like, if we're going to assemble an SEC dunk contest, who's in it?
Oh, God. Well, I mean,
Ricky Council's in there, right? Brandon
Miller, Ricky Council. We're going to get roasted in the comments, which we already are,
because we're going to forget somebody.
There's going to be somebody we forget here, but
Mississippi State's got a few.
What about Olivier Comwa? I'd put him in there maybe. He's had some good ones.
Livingston threw a pretty good one down last night for Kentucky, didn't he?
Give me somebody on Missouri.
Tried to.
Demoy Hodge, Kobe Brown, somebody like that.
Drop your dunk contestants in the comments. Maybe we'll have to do because I mean that just came to me as we're doing this, and so I haven't done any. I mean, we're going to be leaving off somebody who's really good and obvious, and feel free to take us to task for that. But we're just having some fun.
Radford. Yeah, there's some options. So, anyways,
yeah,
that's all I got.
Set up the dunk bracket.
Do you want to talk about Alabama again, or what?
What can we do that'll really tick people off at this point?
I mean, we ticked off the people who had that opinion, but I also, that's what I said. I wanted to make sure.
Right.
This does not need to be just an Alabama equation.
For the record, I don't think we've said anything unfair today. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, let's give Tennessee some love too. Like, let's please not just make this about Alabama. Let's showcase what Tennessee is capable of at their best. So, yeah.
11 times Tennessee's held teams to 50 or below. That is still unbelievable.
Yeah. They're a good team. And they can make other good teams look like that. So, but I get the criticism. I get the point. But we will save that point if Alabama loses again in that situation. Add that as the data point. But I'm just not someone, this. Like, I've talked about this all season, not just with Alabama, but other teams. I'm just not someone that goes too far in the opposite direction based off of one or a couple games, because it's still a team that's only lost 4 games this year. So that was my only point there, was I still think they're pretty good.
Final thought, we didn't really talk Ole Miss. I don't know what is left. I mean, we both really like Kermit Davis, but 10-16, they're going to finish under 500 overall. I think at this point that's probably going to be the only place where we expect a coaching change.
We'll save that for later. We got to keep this under an hour.
Okay.
So we'll save that for another video.
Oh, that means you got a lot to say.
I mean, maybe. I have more. Well, I have more to say than probably 3 minutes, which we need to be done in 3. So, yeah.
That's called a tease, folks.
There you go.
All right.
I don't know how.
Thank you.
Fighting a tease, but
thank you for watching. We're doing baseball, basketball, football all this week, which is kind of how we roll around here. Best way to catch it all is to hit the subscribe button. That costs you nothing. It's just basically a free follow. Hit the like button. That helps us out. If you think annoyed Blake is best Blake, drop that in the comments too.
I'm not annoyed. I'm just
you were annoyed.
I'm not annoyed. I was actually laughing because I thought some of the reaction was laughable, but not all of it. Again, Gotta go a little bit deeper into this stuff, okay? Have a good debate like the old days. Let's just,
What?
get a stage, like, just everybody gets up on the stage and we debate this thing. Like, come on.
I
No
thought we just
duels.
sit around and
But,
yell. I thought that's what we do these days.
yeah, that's pretty much what most of our industry does. So, yeah.
All right. Don't yell at us. Follow us. Hit the like button. Thanks for watching. We're Southeastern 14. We'll see you again soon.